Welcome, dearly adored, chosen ones. The walls recall what the lips forget. The chosen ones. Imagine every laugh behind your back, every sneer when they assumed you were blind, every little movement they made in the darkness. Everything is now clearly visible on a screen. Cameras do not argue. They do not pick sides, nor do they blink. They merely record. Here's a fact that will shake you. According to studies, individuals act up to % differently when they are aware they are being observed. Imagine the shock on their faces when they learn your home is more than simply walls and stuff. It was an eyewitness, and it captured everything. The suspense. They believed they were invisible. In actuality, they were auditioning for the worst reality program ever made. They starred as the baddies, and you were the one who endured every story twist. The funniest part, the same folks who chastised you for being too concerned about safeguarding your space are suddenly worried about their greatest hits being repeated in high definition. So brace yourself, for what these tapes show about your power is more stunning, irrefutable, and unstoppable than any myth they've ever circulated about you. This is not just evidence. This is exposure, which has no erase option. Number 1, they saw the voice of their brutality replayed in pixels, which demolished their explanations. Every tiny twist in the plot is now frozen in frames. The theatrical grins, the controlled silences, the times they choose not to call out for aid. When those instances are looped and repeated, they cease to be separate episodes and begin to read as a debt itemized, irrefutable, and owing, demanding payment in reality. Their prepared defenses now seem to be empty checks from an account with no cash. Recordings remove the great tales people tell themselves and others. It leaves behind precise details that add up to the laughter that echoed over a room when someone needed assistance. They walked away just before taking the responsibilities. The subtle movements intended to degrade or erase. Each one seems insignificant at the moment, simple to dismiss when discussed later, yet piled side by side on a timeline. These modest actions accumulate to form a ledger that demonstrates purpose and pattern. The bankruptcy is emotional and social in nature. They can no longer profess innocence without seeming like performers reciting lines from a play they already failed. Their social position suffers as a result of witnesses seeing the same tape and reaching the same conclusion. People who previously doubted begin to recognize the accumulation rather than simply one-time events. Allies depart, reputations sag, and the infrastructure of their power begins to break. The video does not yell. Instead, it captures the calm. Persistence speaks louder than any performance they have planned. Their reasons were based on fog, hazy recollections, contradictory tales, and plausible deniability. The camera clears the air like a ledger slammed on the table. "There is none," he said. She said that when the sequence is apparent, the pattern transforms subjective perceptions into objective entries that everyone can read, understand, and verify in the end. What does bankruptcy mean to them? It means they face repercussions that go beyond shame. Trust fades, authority dwindles, and the tenuous currency of their tales loses significance. What they previously acquired with charm and trickery is no longer on sale. The film requires them to settle the account, and when they can't, their arguments crumble under the weight of indisputable proof. Their silence becomes a sign of guilt rather than protection, prompting responsibility. Second, the cameras provided indisputable evidence of your daily routines. Everyday routines. The way you fold a towel, the precise sequence in which you put dishes away. The calm routine of flipping a page has evolved beyond just private comfort. They become documented evidence that you were present, consistent, and coherent. These modest, repetitive activities represent a life in motion. When they are repeated, they demonstrate continuity where others attempted to portray disorder. Consistency is an example of evidence. It displays purpose, capacity, and a mind that operates in a consistent, repeated pattern. This trend undermines charges that you were unpredictable, unstable, or untrustworthy. Routine behavior also reveals timing. The specific sequence of actions demonstrates cause and effect. If you are accused of being the initiator, video evidence generally shows who moved first, who smashed a door, who took a step backward, who contacted out. Ordinary routines preserved between explosive times serve as anchor points in the chronology. They give background that undermines created tales. No one can say that someone who patiently maintains their plans or creates a list is acting out of a sudden, uncontrollable wrath. These consistent routines reveal a mind that planned, stops, and persevere. Those little acts show character, such as a hand that constantly gives a cup, a desire to adjust a picture frame, or a practice of stopping to listen. These aren't dramatic, but they're informative. When built up over hours and days, they reveal the reality about who you are. People observing find the accumulation of commonplace conduct appealing since it is difficult to fake over time. When habitual sincerity holds are pushed, performance fractures. This is why film of everyday life is so harmful to false allegations. It emphasizes the contrast between private realities and public deception. Recorded behaviors also counteract spin. Stories are based on selective recollection and emotional recounting. A recorded daily rhythm defies selective editing because its consistent patterns are more difficult to dispute within individual events. Even doubters struggle to reject a lengthy sequence of regular behaviors as coincidence. The more comprehensive the record, the less space there is for uncertainty. Finally, everyday behaviors humanize you in a way that charges cannot. People connect to modest, everyday tasks like making coffee, cleaning the floor, and humming while cooking. When such activities are evident, viewers perceive a person living an everyday life, rather than a caricature created by someone with an objective. That humanization alters perceptions, restores credibility, and transforms basic private rituals into a forceful courtroom of witnesses. Number 3, their control crumbles as the footage refuses to be negotiated. Control is most successful when things are hazy. It relies on fog, specific recollections, changing versions of the same tale, and the uncertainty that occurs when no one knows precisely what occurred. That veil enables them to distort information, introduce half-truths, and reject your point of view as faulty remembering. This is how manipulation persists by making reality seem malleable. However, once the film exists, flexibility is no longer an option. The recorder records precise moments that cannot be negotiated with. A frame illustrates who arrived first, raised their voice, walked away, and remained calm. These are not views. Once recorded, they cannot be redrawn to suit someone's preferences. Their strength dwindles as their primary weapon, narrative, loses efficiency. Spin does not survive when the scene is captured in sound and sight. Bending perception no longer gives them control, and the earth under their feet tilts. The failure to discuss footage creates a danger on numerous levels. It exposes them not just to you, but also to anybody else who witnesses falsehoods being revealed in private. They may still maintain denial when falsehoods are displayed on film. Even their allies start to question. What was once a firm hold on narrative has become a slippery slope in which every word is tested against observable evidence. This change undermines their capacity to elicit loyalty or compassion since evidence speaks louder than persuade. The reality is, control was never about the truth. It was about managing people's beliefs. Recordings undermine the economy. A moment that may have previously been characterized as misinterpreted or out of context now replays in context over and again. Each repetition removes the justifications, leaving only the plain deed. That business is unbearable to someone who enjoys explaining their activities in layers. Even more destructive is the camera's disregard for power systems. It does not consider reputations or social position. It does not soften with charm or power. It handles all subjects with chilly equality. And in that equality, their advantage vanishes. Their control was based on hierarchy. The footage leveled the playing field. When there is nothing left to negotiate, the only option is accountability. And accountability is something they will never be able to manage. Number 4. The recording reveals their economy of little cruelties, the micro-abuses that help establish a case. Abuse does not usually include a single violent incident. It's the accumulation of little, harsh actions that eventually become a system. The film acts as a receipt, collecting those decisions. The evenings when a medication was forgotten, the occasions when a grin was intended to undermine confidence, and the intentional pauses when assistance was required but never provided. Each moment seems small and easily explained away. When strung together, they read like a ledger of purpose. The camera doesn't care about your justifications. It merely records the pattern. When someone observes back-to-back occurrences of prescription withholding, apart from the mocking gaze, the little sabotage, and the outright display of worry, what seems to be an isolated mishap becomes evidence of planning. That accumulated viewpoint alters how individuals understand things. Friends who previously accepted plausible deniability begin to see coordination experts involved in the plot. Lawyers, investigators, and counselors may identify repetitive acts that imply strategy rather than accident. The micro-abuses indicate the fulcrum of power, not the spectacular event yelled about in court or on social media, but the consistent, almost bureaucratic manner in which damage was dispensed. The film transforms private pinpricks into a pattern powerful enough to reveal motivation and technique. The force of this proof rests in its commonplace appearance. These little activities were allowed unnoticed because they seemed insignificant. People discounted them since recognizing even little damage would need ongoing attention and moral exertion. However, when recorded collectively, they result in a different computation. Silence no longer resembles forgiveness, but rather collaboration. Patterns make the ethereal concrete. Neglect becomes neglect. Sarcasm becomes an intentional weapon, and avoidance becomes a strategy. The video replaces the notion that each occurrence was an isolated lapse with a clear sequence that emphasizes the accused involvement. The impact is corrosive. When the plan is revealed, the defense fails. There's no longer any space for them to pretend they didn't intend it or that everything was an unfortunate sequence of coincidences. The network of plausible deniability is shattered since the camera's ledger is visible by anybody who wants to seek for survivors. That visibility is freeing. What originally seemed like gaslighting, being told you overreacted or misremembered, now becomes proof that can be shared, evaluated, and acted on. The tape does not require drama. It needs honesty. And, unfortunately, that emphasis on truth is the most terrible thing for people who have established their authority on repeated little injustices. Number 5. Your position on camera becomes a documented moral argument. They cannot tell you how you stand, breathe, or where you rest your hands. When nothing major occurs, your modest bodily decisions become statements about who you are. The camera catches the consistency of your presence in simple repeated film, which reads as evidence of purpose. When you stand your ground quietly rather than lash out, the moment on video demonstrates that you are a person with limits, not a spectacle. That documented calm contradicts any narrative that portrays you as unstable or reactive. Because peacefulness on camera is difficult to fake consistently and simple for others to notice and agree on, footage taken over time becomes a kind of testimony. A stable stance after a provocation demonstrates restraint and control. Viewers see the cycle of provocation, a pause, then a determined decision not to escalate. That cycle throws the burden of evidence back onto the attacker. If they say you were the initiator, the video contradicts them by displaying measured replies rather than frenzied ones. When several individuals see the same frames, the emotional interpretation becomes communal, and a stance that was formerly reserved for private dignity becomes public proof of moral stability. This recorded stillness has rhetorical strength since it rejects the drama that they rely on. Their method often focuses on theatrics and exaggerated reactions to defend their own actions. When the camera captures you staying composed versus dramatically contrived and opportunistic, the difference is evident. One side acts a crisis, while the other answers with serene dignity. People inherently prefer coherence to disorder, thus this contrast affects perception. The camera just captures such contrasts and makes them visible to everybody who looks. Your physical calm also indicates sovereignty when you seize and hold space without apologies. The film depicts an embodied assertion of selfhood that opposes shame. It indicates that your presence is not fleeting or unintentional, but purposeful. This evident claim is unbearable to those who gained from your disgrace. The whole system hinged on exhausting you until you fled. Footage showing you staying strong negates that technique by demonstrating that you are not reduced. In summary, posture on camera transforms private determination into public evidence. It converts action into argument, and argument into proof. This transition is deadly for manipulators because it compels them to respond to tangible truth rather than convincing deception. The film does not negotiate sentiments. It presents facts. Your composed recorded stance becomes a moral argument that they cannot refute. Number 6. The film produces witnesses out of walls and lighting. The house itself bears testimony. A room contains more than just furnishings. It keeps sequences in context. When a camera is activated, a clock becomes a timestamp, a corridor becomes a route walked, and a kitchen tile becomes a fixed point indicating where bodies were. And when those fixed facts become evidence because they are consistent and impartial, they do not succumb to excuses or memories. A video doorway records who left first. A recorded shadow records how someone shifted the architecture of a house, caught in frames, materials, and the chronology that words alone cannot provide. This kind of testimony is effective because it reduces dependence on recollection. That slick thing that individuals manipulate to suit their narrative. Memories blur nights and compress sequences. However, objects in space do not. A recorded cup left on the table for many minutes serves as evidence that someone remained. The tension lasted. A light turned off at a certain second indicates that an activity happened at that precise instant. These commonplace objects serve as truth anchors. They lock events in place in a manner that human dispute cannot reverse. When the house testifies, denials seem little and pitiful, as if someone was not present. Falls apart if the hallway camera shows their shadow going by while saying nothing occurred. Feels empty when the tape shows a door smashed, footfall rushing, and then quiet measured by a stopped clock. The actual configuration of a chair facing which window was open. The direction of a body becomes part of the narrative. Arguments want to avoid this context since it connects intentions to acts and reveals purpose. The unbiased testimony of a location also influences who pays attention. Neighbors, friends, and investigators may all view the same frames and get identical conclusions since the home serves as a common reference. It levels subjective readings. People cease debating over sentiments and instead agree on a series of occurrences. Who moved where and when. That unified viewpoint elevates interactions from rumors to something verifiable. Finally, object evidence has both legal and social implications. Courts and investigators take context carefully. A recorded environment that corresponds with claims converts suspicion into confirmation. For survivors, this means that private turmoil becomes public clarity for the offender, as the safety net of selective memory is removed. The home, which was formerly a backdrop to calm existence, becomes an ally. It maintains the history, saves the evidence, and communicates via pixels and timestamps in a language that is both simple and devastatingly accurate. Number 7. Seeing themselves recorded compels them to feel the consequences of their decisions. Most individuals can live with their actions as long as they remain abstract, tucked away in memory, where they may modify, soften, or even deny them entirely. But a recording takes away that privilege. It reflects their decisions in real time, forcing them to face not just what they did, but also the consequences. They witness the insult fall on your face, the manipulation play out in your body language, and the precise instant their choice changed into your hurt. The footage denies them the luxury of distance. Suddenly, cause and consequence are not separated by months or years. They are right there, back to back. Undeniable. The breakdown of distance is terrible. It indicates not just what they did, but also the chain reaction it initiated. A sarcastic statement is no longer merely a jest. It transforms into a seed that causes a visible alteration in the atmosphere of the room. A slammed door is more than simply an expression of fury. It is a moment that alters the course of a whole evening. These waves, which were imperceptible while lived through, become noticeable when repeated. Watching themselves cause such changes pushes them to face reality they'd rather avoid. The emotional effect of such encounter varies, but nothing is simple. Some people spiral into guilt when the weight of their decisions becomes clear and they are no longer able to believe that their activities were innocuous. Others worry as they realize that what they believed was buried is now forever saved and may be replayed by anybody at any moment. And other people are outraged, not because the tape is false, but because the reality it contains undermines the narrative they've relied on to keep power. What makes this so effective is that the camera does not moralize. It just shows. It gives them no space to negotiate with perception. They can't argue you overreacted since the tape clearly exposes their actions. What is your response? They can't claim it wasn't unpleasant when the wave of pain is visible to everyone in the shot. That harsh honesty transforms private intents into public proof, and there is no filter powerful enough to remove it. In the end, getting caught isn't the most unsettling thing. It is being pushed to perceive itself as the cause of damage. That mirror is sharper than memory, and once seen, it's impossible to forget. Number 8 is the camera archive. Your commonplace decency and dignity serve as terrible evidence. Dignity does not come with words or loud dissent. It lives in regular ways. You carry yourself when no one is clapping. The camera captures the little, unglamorous elements that, over time, form a picture of perseverance. It captures you pinning down a list to organize your thoughts, taking a breather rather than erupting in chaos, watering a plant as if life were still worth sustaining. None of these instances seem great, but collectively they indicate something that no rumor, falsehood, or smear campaign can erase. You never gave up your core. You remained intact. This is effective since allegations often portray you as unstable, emotional, or incapable of managing yourself. Ordinary gestures of dignity fundamentally invalidate the story. A person who sits down to write things out instead of unraveling and chooses care over collapse is not fragile, but rather disciplined. That calmness captured on video reveals a narrative that rumor cannot change. It provides clear evidence that you were not broken, but only temporarily restricted by circumstance. The strength of this evidence rests in its simplicity. Grand gestures may be dismissed as performances, while ordinary, everyday activities are more difficult to mimic. People who view the film see continuity day after day. You return to your regular chores and treat yourself with care, however tiny. This continuity reads as strength since it is durable. Strength is more than just one act of disobedience. It is the choice to live properly throughout a storm. The camera captures this, and it becomes a silent but deadly reaction to any effort to paint you as unfit. What bothers people who oppose you is how unwavering that dignity seems on film. They sought proof of breakdown, anything to justify their treatment of you. However, the film shows the contrary. Rather than collapse, it demonstrates equilibrium. Instead of despair, it depicts little but continuous actions of life. They're left with nothing to point to, no evidence that you lost yourself. And in their quiet, the truth becomes louder. Finally, the archive of dignity is more than simply remembrance. It is evidence. Proof that, although you were tested, you were never defeated. Proof that strength does not always dominate. It is frequently sufficient to just stand silently till the storm has passed. That kind of evidence is tough to delete. It is disastrous for those who have based their power on your perceived vulnerability. The 9th recording translates private patterns into public reasoning, and rationality overcomes fiction. A single occurrence may be spun into anything. Someone might claim it was an accident, a misunderstanding, or even your fault. That is the power of isolation. It allows for creativity, which is where lies flourish. However, as behavior is routinely documented, the imagination diminishes. Patterns replace guesswork. Suddenly, it's not just a strange moment. It's a series. And a sequence conveys a tale that cannot be changed because it is logical. Motive, method, effect. That logical chain is what makes recordings so deadly for deceit. A single door slam might be overlooked, but 10 slams in a month create a pattern that demonstrates temperament. A single insult may be disregarded as the passion of the moment, but repeated belittling over days demonstrates malice. When footage connects those parts, it creates a narrative that is stronger than any fiction they attempt to manufacture. Even someone who wishes to defend them will struggle, since the brain instinctively follows patterns. When a pattern is evident, it overcomes prejudice. The strength of this argument is that it does not need explanation. The film does not state, "Here is the motive, here is the method." It simply arranges occurrences side by side until the explanation is evident. You do not need a narrator to describe what occurred. The spectator becomes their own narrator, and the conclusions they reach are more significant because they sense self-discovery. That's the type of truth that sticks. The type of adjustment that individuals believe they came to on their own, rather than being convinced to make, is disastrous for fabrication. Lives are built on fragmented context, taking a bit of reality and framing it with exactly the right words. However, a chain of evidence does not allow for such modifications. Once the cause and consequence are clear, the constructed frame falls due to its own weakness. Judges, friends, and even strangers who have no relationship to you will be forced to accept the footage's straightforward linear flow. It's no longer about persuasion. It's a deduction. Finally, recordings change what was formerly your word against theirs into a logical sequence that speaks for itself. And logic, once understood, is unanswerable. No amount of talent, charm, or brilliant recounting can fight against a pattern that has been made clear. That is why they dread the tape, since it eliminates the drama and leaves simply the facts. They were stripped of the outfits they were hiding behind. Number 10. The film alters their projected identity, creating a mismatch between who they profess to be and who they are. Reputation is often considered as a protection. People curate a public image of themselves that serves as a kind of protection, being giving in public, courteous in meetings, and supportive when the spotlight is on them. That image becomes an insurance policy, which they use anytime their conduct is questioned. However, a recording functions similarly to an audit. It determines if the public tale reflects the private truth. And when the two do not agree, the shield becomes proof of hypocrisy. For someone who delights on living two lives, this is terrible. Their power is based on the disparity between their appearance and their real behavior. They need people to believe in their goodness so that their wickedness might go undiscovered. They need people to believe their statements so that their manipulation may pass for leadership. The illusion unravels when the film is played again. The grin from the charity event does not cancel out. The smirk was captured on video at home. The carefully cultivated identity falls under the weight of obvious contradiction. That breakdown is much more destructive than getting caught in a single terrible act. Mistakes may be forgiven. A continuous mismatch cannot. When individuals discover that someone's apparent generosity was a front for private brutality, every previous contact is reinterpreted. Compliments sounds manipulative. Offers of assistance seem suspicious. Even quiet seems calculated. The reputational impact is more than simply one instance of exposure. It is retroactive. It changes how individuals see everything they thought they knew. The clip also undermines their traditional justifications. They cannot reply, "That is not who I am," when who they are is clearly documented with who they claim to be. They can't say they were misunderstood when the difference between stage charm and raw conduct is obvious. The camera does not merely capture the deed. It demonstrates the shift in character. The instant the mask slips. That kind of exposure is unarguable since it has nothing to do with language. It is about alignment, or the lack thereof. Finally, the recording serves as more than just proof of wrongdoing. It becomes a test of character. It displays the identification gaps so plainly that even their sympathizers must choose between accepting what they've seen with their own eyes and adhering to a tale that is no longer relevant. When they are forced to make this decision, their reputation insurance coverage is null and invalid. The same image they relied on to defend themselves becomes the most powerful weapon against them. Number cameras capture tiny movements of power. Small nominations revealing character strength are seldom announced with great gestures. It often advances silently via subtle disruptions, modest intrusions of space, and tiny declarations that others are expected to notice without recognizing it. A hand reaching first for control, a tone that interrupts someone in mid-sentence, or a body posture that blocks or shadows another. These are just the fingerprints of intent. Each act may seem insignificant or inadvertent. When documented over time, they generate a behavioral signature that cannot be rejected or ignored. That signature is compelling because it expresses individuality via movement. When these patterns continue, even those who are inexperienced in human behavior may see the imbalance. However, for professional therapists, investigators, and jurors, the evidence is overwhelming. The minuscule motions indicate hierarchy, intention, and technique. They demonstrate who desires dominance, manipulates the environment to keep power, and responds to discomfort in order to establish themselves. These aren't abstract attributes anymore. They're visible, quantifiable, and repeatable. The camera also performs another function that is often overlooked. It transforms everyday environments into behavioral amplifiers. A door frame, a chair, and a corridor all serve as reference points for how power is wielded. The manner an individual moves in respect to these items. Who receives the light? Who gets the space? It is part of the pattern that spatial choreography may disclose as much as words or facial gestures, because it is more difficult to fake consistently. Over time, these movements build into a tale of authority, restriction, or manipulation, which no narrative can overturn. Once the pattern is identified, the stakes for the person in charge change substantially. Small dominations that were previously unseen or neglected are now on show. Their capacity to affect perception is reduced since observers may see how the signature is understood and predict its repetition. What was once an implicit hierarchy has become objective, verifiable fact. Finally, these micro-movements demonstrate that character exists via action rather than words. Cameras store, combine, and reveal it in a compelling and unavoidable manner. The subtle influence they believed was concealed is suddenly exposed, and everyone watching can see the tale that has always been there, gently developing until it can no longer be ignored. Your real-time responses indicate cause rather than imagined effect. Abuse and manipulation sometimes include reversing roles, with the subject seeming aggressive while the originator hides behind a created tale. They rely on bystanders who just witness your answer and believe it came out of nowhere. The recording, when taken out of context, breaks that illusion. Every provocation is recorded, and every response occurs shortly after that. Sequencing eliminates uncertainty. It exposes the sequence of events, indicating who began and replied. When your measured answer is contrasted with the provocation, it produces an irrefutable, credible story of cause and effect. A harsh phrase, a dismissive gesture, or a subtle intimidation. All of these are collected sequentially, along with your calm reaction. The contrast between their actions and your response is stark because it eliminates ambiguity. No reasonable observer may argue that your reaction was unprovoked or disproportionate. The tape enables viewers to follow the progression from instigation to conclusion, showing manipulation for what it is. This real-time capture also eliminates spin. Accusers often utilize selective recall or modified stories to reinterpret history in their favor. They want to accentuate your response while minimizing or deleting the original trigger. The camera avoids this. It maintains the chronology by displaying the provocation first, and your reaction comes second, leaving no room for interpretation. Every gesture, tone, and emotion contributes to a logical sequence that cannot be refuted. Furthermore, this exposure creates responsibility. The instigator's acts are recorded, thus they can no longer claim innocence. When the sequence of events becomes evident, their method of putting blame onto you fails. The video doesn't merely demonstrate your restraint. It reveals their intention. Observers will see the manipulative patterns, premeditated timing, and repeated efforts to provoke, all followed by your controlled management. In the end, real-time responses recorded on video convert impressions into proof. They change the narrative away from assumption and hearsay and toward clarity. The camera does not just record events. It keeps justice in motion by demonstrating who struck first, kept calm, and eventually behaved with integrity. It makes the truth difficult to refute, and the tale is clearly yours. The recording compels the community to prioritize proof above allegiance. Most individuals choose tales that support their beliefs because accepting the truth may be unpleasant, disagreeable, or even dangerous. Loyalty provides a cushion that allows people to overlook discrepancies, dismiss misconduct, or justify bad actions. When the footage is present, the cushion disappears. The community is faced with a clear decision: either admit the truth or continue to lie. That decision is inescapable since the data speaks for itself and cannot be altered without seeming dishonest. This dynamic alters everything. When individuals see the recorded reality, they are compelled to reconsider their preconceptions. Friends, neighbors, co-workers, and even casual spectators can no longer depend on secondhand information or easy stories. They must reconcile their beliefs with what they see before them. This reevaluation calls into question long-standing relationships based on insufficient facts or biased narrative. The act of seeing the material requires a reckoning. Those who were previously silenced may now talk. Those who backed the falsehood may reconsider, and accountability starts to spread. In this way, the camera takes on more than just a passive role. It becomes a tool for moral pressure. It does not impose a judgment, but it reveals the facts so fully that rejection or defense of falsehoods takes deliberate effort against observable reality. Community members cannot depend only on assumptions, gossip, or emotional allegiance. They must face what occurred, assess it rationally, and make a decision. That decision reveals character just as obviously as the video does his deeds. This procedure also changes societal dynamics. People who previously benefited from supporting misleading narratives are being compelled to reassess their positions. The credibility of individuals who identify with the truth grows, while the authority of those hiding behind falsehood decreases. The mere act of documenting elevates private activity to public responsibility. Ultimately, the tape does more than just exonerate the person it depicts. It alters the moral landscape of the whole community. It requires clarity, forces judgments, and prioritizes evidence above prejudice. The camera transforms into a civic tool, showing patterns that loyalty alone cannot conceal and compelling a reckoning that reshapes relationships, trust, and accountability. Ultimately, the recording does not just vindicate you. It transforms the geography of power itself. Evidence does more than prove or refute false narratives. It changes who has influence and who gets exposed. A single recording has the potential to change previously uncontested dynamics. It has the potential to influence judicial results by giving indisputable evidence, dismantling secret networks based on secrecy and deception, and redirecting power to people who have previously been silenced. The weight of truth does more than just cleanse reputations. It distributes electricity, and in doing so, it undermines the structures designed to protect the guilty. This fundamental transformation is what scares manipulators the most. They are used to using techniques such as obscurity, intimidation, or disinformation to maintain power. Everything is called into question by the recording. It demonstrates that their carefully designed systems of influence are unstable when confronted with unalterable proof. Their customary leverage, threats, fear, or deceit are rendered useless since the film reveals a structure they cannot modify. They can no longer expect people to trust the tale they tell. The truth now determines the agenda. The influence goes beyond individual confrontations. Networks formed on their advantage begin to disintegrate as friends and watchers reconsider their loyalty. People who previously strengthened their control are compelled to face reality. Silence and complicity are no longer considered neutral. They become decisions with clear repercussions. That adjustment in perception and alignment is lasting since the proof serves as a fixed point for everyone to reference. This rearrangement is freeing for the person who was recorded on video. It rebalances the power dynamic in their favor, allowing them to impose authority by visibility rather than fear. For the manipulators, it is terrifying since it demonstrates that their previous techniques no longer provide immunity. Every lie, omission, and act of control is now subject to examination that cannot be overlooked or erased. Finally, the tape reconstructs the social and moral superstructure that surrounds you, rather than just vindicating you. It does not just prove a point. It redefines the laws, redistributes power, and compels a reckoning that extends well beyond the present moment. The terrain of power is shifting toward accountability, leaving those who depended on deception vulnerable and impotent. The recordings capture more than just moments. They present the truth in its purest form. Every frame reveals purpose, action, and outcome, leaving no space for deception, manipulation, or denial. They transform acts into indisputable proof of consistency, where others perceived disorder, dignity, when others anticipated breakdown and constraint, where others anticipated a reply. They deconstruct false narratives, expose power dynamics, and compel responsibility on several levels, including relationships, networks, and communities. What the cameras capture becomes more than just evidence of your perseverance. It becomes a symbol of your autonomy. Your life, which was before confined and monitored, is now fully exposed. Every modest act of calm, every regular habit, and every calculated and planned response contribute to a portrayal of someone who refused to be humbled by the forces arrayed against them. Those who attempted to manipulate, humiliate, or control were left exposed, forced to face oneself and the repercussions of their decisions. Finally, these records do more than just vindicate. They also recalibrate power. They read about distributing influence where it belongs, forced the community to prioritize facts above allegiance, making patterns of abuse evident. They turn the everyday into moral evidence, and the ordinary into irresistible truth. For those who attempted to control via terror or trickery, the exposure is terrible. For you, it represents liberty. Your power has been retained, your integrity is evident, and your tale cannot be changed. The message is plain. The truth has been captured. The trend is apparent. And justice, as seen and felt, is unavoidable. The footage does not simply describe the tale. It ensures that the tale cannot be removed. If this video opened your eyes and presented facts that cannot be ignored, make sure to subscribe to the channel to avoid missing out on future revelations like these. Please like the video to show your support. Comment to share your ideas and experiences, and share them with anybody who needs to realize the power of verified truth. Every click to help spread awareness guarantees that the story is heard and reinforces the message that what is recorded cannot be deleted. Your participation is more than simply support. It is part of keeping the truth alive. God bless you.